Hey, welcome back. We're continuing with our skilled counselor training model. And again, you've seen this slide several different times now. And my purpose in actually showing you that slide is so you see the big picture of this whole model. Sometimes whenever you focus in on one section, you kind of lose the big picture. So we want to make sure that all those things are connected together and that you see how they flow together. So far you've done the exploring stage. You're experts at that by now. Interchangeable empathy, I know you're working on that. We move into the decision making and contracting. Really one of the challenges that a new therapist face is trying to problem solve, trying to step in and provide some kind of solution, advice, however they want to term that. But the reality is this model actually does get to the point where it provides some help and some challenge and some decision making, but it's not here. It's not here. It happens out here. Now, you may actually choose to slowly slide some of these things in over here, but you want to make sure in the end you actually do fulfill these things, and that's what we're going to talk about here. Probably one of the main things, though, is that we do not bring this decision-making stage into the exploring stage. Do you know why? Because we don't know much here. We're just trying to gather information. We're trying to assess and understand. This is not the place for that. And so sometimes I'll watch a video and 7.5 minutes into the 60-minute session, we're providing some of this action stage. No, we hold off on that and we make sure we understand here first. And trust me, it takes that much time. It takes 45 minutes to try and understand what is taking place for a client. So we're going to move over to the action stage and take a look at each one of those individually. All right, first one, decision-making process in the action stage is, again, deciding. And so deciding is not for us as a therapist to decide what the client should do. We have a term for that. It's called homework. And so many times the therapist will say, well, for homework, I want you to. And what do you think clients do with that phrase? Dependent clients will say, oh, yes, marvelous, wonderful counselor, I'll do anything that you say. A lot of other clients will be like, sure, they'll appease you as the therapist. And then a week later when they show back up, what do you think they bring? What do you think? How much homework do you think they did? Much less than what you talked about in session. And you have to answer the question, why is that? Why do clients not do homework that you assign? Well, I'm going to suggest it's because they don't have ownership in it. It's your ownership. You're invested in it as a therapist. They're not invested in it. In session it sounds good, but it just doesn't take hold for them. And so this decision-making process, this deciding piece here is really the opportunity for you to engage them in selecting options for things that they might want to do. So, one of the first things you might do is reframe the client's problem into choice language. You could even say, well, according to what you shared with me, you could probably do this or maybe potentially do something like this over here. It sounds to me like you have a lot of options. I'm an illustrative therapist, and so I'll even pull my hand out and I'll say, well, you could potentially do this, or this is an option, and I know in the past you've done this and you've met some success with that, and there's this one down here, and I know there's one down here, I don't even know what that is yet, but help me, let's talk about what these things are. And so we have a conversation about what the options could be for them. And so this is sort of exploratory. Next one here is, it looks like there are several choices to consider, and again, my hand is out there, and I'm just kind of looking at some of those options. I'm also listening throughout the session because clients will kind of provide some options throughout the session, and I'll bring them back up, and I might say, well, 30 minutes ago you mentioned about, stopping and getting your wife a bouquet of flowers at Giant, which, I don't know, maybe that could be helpful for her and for you. And so, again, sort of helping them to decide what those things might be. And then choosing. Here's where we kind of move into them deciding on something. So choosing is letting them kind of decide on what that thing might be. And actually, I might even say something like, so what is it you want to do? And what, we've talked for 45 minutes. We've talked about several different options here. What is it you want to do? What do you think would be best? Sometimes I phrase it as an action plan. Let's create an action plan here. What is it you think would be helpful for you? And then I move to that choosing, and I say, well, okay, so let's just assume that you do that. Let's just say that you buy those flowers. Let's just say you do that. What do you think will be the effect of that? Well, she'll be tickled, and it'll be really good for when I go home, and, she'll be really pleased with me and certainly our relationship, and I think she'll warm up. Would that be helpful for you? Well, let's just say that happens. Maybe you do that periodically, and that's not always flowers, but maybe it's some other things that you're just being intentional about caring for her. Let's just say, what is it, the middle of February? Let's just say to the end of March, you just do that regularly. So what do you think will be the effect? And so again, I'm looking at helping to establish hope for him that he sees, if I do that, it's going to be beneficial. So another example might be someone who's really trying to become healthy, maybe lose weight, maybe do some exercise, and so you say, and they say, well, I'm gonna exercise, 6 times a week, 6 nights a week, and I say, that sounds pretty good. How many times have you been exercising now? Well, I get out once, so we're going to go from 1 to 6. Do you think it's reality that you'll get to the 6? Is that a good enough goal? Is that too much or not enough? And they might say, well, maybe 4 would be better. I said, okay, you want to go back to 4? Let's do 4. Let's just say that you do 4. And Easter's in April, I believe, this year. And so let's just say by Easter time, you've done 4 times each week. You're being consistent about your exercise. And by Easter time, how will you feel about yourself, about your exercise, about your physical stamina at that point? What will you say? And you know what they're going to say. I feel great. If I could do that till then, that would be awesome. You've now just tapped into that hope that they have. And so that may help them to choose it and actually to be successful at it. And then down here, deciding and increasing that client's commitment to change. And so really kind of keep pushing them. So, okay, you said 4. Are you good for 4? You're going to make 4? Is that what we're sticking with? Then let's go with 4. Because you know what I'm going to do? You see what I'm doing here? I'm writing this down in my notes because when you come back in, I'm going to keep checking. How you making out? How'd you do on the 4? And I'm going to pat you on the back if you did well. I'm going to kick you in the pants if you didn't do well, because that's the goal that you set for yourself. Okay? Then the next one is, this is a really important one. Sometimes therapists sort of forget about this. This is identifying the consequences. When you think about why does a client not, I'll use this, the illustration of the exercise, why are they not exercising 4 times a week? Well, because everything gets in the way, right? I mean, they're busy and they're tired and, I don't know, it costs money, their wife doesn't want them to go, I don't know what it happens to be, but lots of different things. And so it's important to identify those consequences. Figure out what those things are. I'll call them hurdles to success. There's certainly things that come up that they ought to kind of negotiate now ahead of time. And so this is you kind of working with them to negotiate those things. So there's certainly some challenges to that success, and there's patterns that they have that they'll have to adjust and change and recognize that may conflict with their goals. Another phrase is a risk for success. This is negative outcomes. Well, if I blank, how might the ramifications affect me? If I choose to go home and sit in front of the TV, how's that going to affect my goal? What impact is that going to have? If I choose to hit the snooze 4 times in a row and I kind of lose that hour that I had, to potentially go and exercise, what happens to you? Are you okay with that? No, I'm not okay with that. And then how willing am I to accept the effects of my choice? So it's helping them to think through all the ramifications of this. So this decision-making process, there's really 3 elements to it, but I got to tell you, that probably takes about 3 or 4 minutes to go through that, and that's all. It should move kind of rapidly, kind of quickly. You should bounce from one to the next. First, it's that choosing, it's thinking through the options, and the second one is considering what the hurdles might be to that. And then the last one, actually, The last one is the hurdles to success. The middle one is that finding hope. And if they do complete it, help to forecast what will occur for them and what it'll be like if they actually do well at it. That should all happen in 3-4 minutes at the most. And then the last part of this is on this contracting process. And I keep this in the form and in the model because the authors have it in the model. The difficulty is in the sessions that you often show to me for your for the coursework. It's not typically ongoing sessions, and this contracting process sort of assumes that there's an ongoing therapeutic relationship. And so we'll talk down through it anyway. Reaching agreements and setting deadlines, so restating goals, leading to proposed and reaching consensus on the action plan. So potentially use of goals and objectives, thinking through, and you've done that in class, thinking through their goals and their objectives, how they're going to accomplish it, and keeping them on task with those things, which is an important aspect. And then the SMART goals, you guys did this already, the specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. I will think through those things in that choosing process. So when a client says, oh yeah, I'm going to exercise 8 times a week, I'm going to think, okay, specific, yes. Measurable, sure. Attainable, probably not. Realistic, I don't think so. Yeah, they could probably start and stop, but there's some of these that's not going to work very well. And so I might not come back to them and say, gee, why don't we set up some SMART goals and see how that's going to work? I'll just come back to them and say, when you think about sort of being realistic, as we want our goals to be realistic, how do you think that will work for you? And they'll say, well, it's going to be really challenging. I think I can do it. Tell me a time in the past when you have been able to do that and be that disciplined, because I think you said before you're doing it once a week. Maybe it might be helpful to work up to that. The goal might be maybe 8 times, but maybe there's an intermediary step that you want to consider. Like, I don't know, what might that be? And they would say, well, I don't know, 7 would be an intermediary step. And I might say, well, you know what would you be satisfied with if you could accomplish? And then you could look back after 6 weeks and say, boy, I'm really glad I did that. What would that number be? And I think at that point they're going to push back to a 4 or a 5 or even a 3 or 4 or 5. And that's probably more realistic. So that's probably where I would try to push them back down into that. The last part of the contracting process is reviewing goals and actions to determine the outcome. So again, it's providing accountability and any kind of revision of the goals. We don't always create the best goals the first time around, so it's important to revise them as needed. And then make sure that the goals and actions are consistent with the client's overall needs. Make sure they fit into the treatment plan. We haven't talked about treatment plans. That's that longer, bigger picture. But ultimately, we want to make sure that it fits in with what they're presenting for therapy with. So let's just say they're coming in and you're treating them for depression. What is the connection between depression and then creating exercise goals? They have to be connected. And so you always want to make sure that whatever you're encouraging them to do or even holding them accountable to actually fits with their treatment plan. And then follow through on, there's the dreaded word homework. I apologize it's on here, but it is. We can call it what it is. We just typically don't talk about it like that with the client. So that is the action stage. To me, it's kind of the fun stage. It's intentional. It's that opportunity when we really get to push them and encourage them towards actually facilitating some kind of change. So that is the action stage. Thanks.